So, Mark, I mean, let's back up just a little bit here. Classically, what happens between an oil and gas company and, let's say, a municipality that wants to prevent this oil and gas company from drilling in their city or their town? I mean, why? Why? I think most people would assume, like, if a city or town says we're not going to allow drilling, then there's no drilling.
Well, typically a community would go and would hire some attorneys and maybe lobby the state or the federal government not to grant that oil and gas company a permit to either frack or drill one of these injection wells. But in the case of some of these towns all across the country, including in Pennsylvania, they are trying to declare self-determination, that they have the democratic right to self-govern. So they are passing these ordinances. But the states are saying, no, we have priority. There's this thing called the Dillon's Rule, which says that states have the ultimate authority to govern these towns.
And so oil and gas companies are coming in and they're spending all their lobbying dollars in the state houses. And that way, it's basically, I guess two birds, many birds with one stone type of situation.
Yeah, I mean, Pennsylvania, which I focused on in the article I wrote, a town in Pennsylvania. Yeah, the oil and gas, mainly natural gas companies, have lobbied fiercely over the past 10 years to get the legislators on their side, and that's been the case. So, a state could pass a law saying that towns do have the right to self-governance and pass their own laws, not allowing these fracking wastewater injection wells.
Well, tell us about this town in Pennsylvania.
Well, there's a small town about 90 miles northeast of Pittsburgh, kind of in the western side of the state, that decided it didn't want all of this wastewater, fracking wastewater, chemicals, radioactive materials that are brought up after you frack a well. They didn't want all of those materials injected into a 1,000-foot well in their community. It would mean lots of trucks bringing all of that wastewater into their community, and it potentially could mean that their drinking water would be contaminated if there was something that went wrong with the casing surrounding the well itself. So they passed this ordinance back in 2014 using the help of this law firm which pursues these novel legal arguments. They passed a law saying that no injection wells are allowed in their town. And that really made the industry mad. And this company called Pennsylvania Gas and Energy, they filed a lawsuit against the town itself.
And so give us a sense of what was, you said this firm develops novel legal strategies. What was the strategy in this instance? I mean, it seems pretty straightforward. Write a law that says that they can't come in.
Well, in this case, it's called a community bill of rights, and they are saying that if corporations are allowed to file lawsuits, then nature in itself should be able to be protective. Corporations shouldn't have any more legal standing than towns and the rights of nature in itself. So it's called the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund. They are based there in Pennsylvania, but they've filed lawsuits on behalf of municipalities and even governments across the nation and around the world. And they just believe, like you just said, localities should have the right to self-governance. And in this case, Pennsylvania, an energy extraction state where oil and gas companies, coal companies, have most of the power in the state legislature in Harrisburg, they believe that municipalities, if they don't want this polluting industry in their town, they shouldn't have to have it.
And so I guess the interesting doctrine here is that corporations are a function of the state, right? And not, I mean, the state writ large, the federal government, and I guess the state, and depending on where they're incorporated. But they exist as because they're an entity created by the state, or at least licensed by the state. And so too is a town, right? I mean, is that the idea that there should be some type of parity here?
Yeah, and this group is arguing that actually communities and people themselves that live in these communities should have maybe a little more power about what happens, power over what happens in their communities than these corporations. But at least there should be parity, just like you said.
And talk about this other component, the rights of nature. What is that theory based on?
The rights of nature is based on the theory that nature in itself, rivers, trees, forests, ecosystems, are not there for the use of humans. They're there because they're there, and that they have rights themselves. So the other case that I wrote about in this article was one that took place in Colorado, also in federal court. The Pennsylvania case is still ongoing in a federal court, district court in Pennsylvania. But a lawyer in Denver, he filed another novel lawsuit, and he filed a lawsuit on behalf of the Colorado River, which is it's having some problems. It's a very polluted river. It's a river that goes through some dry spells, and he filed the lawsuit against the state of Colorado on behalf of the Colorado River, saying that the Colorado River should have its rights just like anybody else. And they kind of use the argument that a child, and I'm not trying to equate humans with rivers, but a child often will use a guardian, have a guardian file a lawsuit on their behalf. So in this case, this lawyer and another group, which is serving as a next friend, that's a legal term, a next friend, this other group is serving as a next friend, kind of like a guardian on behalf of the Colorado River.
And so at what point is the case centered around that theory, or is that theory functional if the case proceeds? In other words, I would imagine that's the type of thing where a corporation would say, we're going to file a motion because these people don't have any standing. They're not the river. The river is not doesn't have rights under this court. And do we have a sense of whether or not the court has taken what their perspective is on this theory of who can sue?
Well, in the case of Colorado, another heavy energy extraction case, oil and gas, coal, in this case, the court and the Attorney General's office in the state of Colorado have gone after this particular attorney very aggressively, saying he is putting forth a frivolous argument. And the Attorney General in Colorado said if he continued forward with this case, he would be subject to penalties and possible disbarment. So the court and the Attorney General, which claims, I mean, it's kind of unusual since the Attorney General is the defendant in this case, but the Attorney General in Colorado said, if you go forward, then we will penalize you greatly and possibly force you to be disbarred from arguing the law in the future.
And this is a big part of your piece, and that is that there is a new strategy that is being adopted by these oil and gas companies, I guess, and that is to target the advocates, to target the lawyers. We have seen this before at various times, not necessarily in the context of these cases, but certainly in the political context. When we come back, let's talk a little bit more about that, how these corporations are targeting lawyers to basically push back and make sure that no legal theories that protect a community from oil and gas companies will end up becoming law of the land. We got to take a quick break. I'm Sam Seder. This is Ring of Fire Radio. We'll be right back with Mark Hand in a moment.